You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All righty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined as always by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing good. Getting ready to celebrate America's birthday here on a Friday. What a fun 3-day weekend this is. So, honestly, the sports world has been kind of fast and furious here the last couple of days. Not necessarily NFL, but you had both NBA and NHL drafts. You have free agency opening up for both NBA and NHL. And if you follow those sports really closely, it is kind of fun that you don't have a big letdown after the finals, right? You have the championship, and then you're jumping right into the draft and free agency. And, the NFL, maybe it's because you have more of a buildup and people care more about the combine and the pro days and everything else that you're able to stretch it out a little bit. But it is kind of fun jumping right to the finals, and then boom, 2 weeks later, okay, here we go. Like, now you get to see what your team's adding in on. Like, it's the previous season is fresh in your mind, right? How your team performed down the stretch. I'm sure it makes things chaotic for their front offices. But from a viewership standpoint, I very much enjoy it. So I've just been kind of keeping an ear to that as we're navigating a semi slow news period in regards to fantasy football. But nevertheless, it's Tuesday. I'm here with you guys, and I'm ready to rock and roll.
So it's a slow news period, and it's kind of just like a ho-hum sports period too. Not a ton going on in terms of actual competition, but you're right. Free agency's been a lot of fun. I've been keeping up with it. Unrelated to football and hockey and basketball, went and saw the F1 movie this past weekend. Even if you're not an F1 fan, which my wife very much is not an F1 fan, which kills me inside. She enjoyed it. She had a good time. So I recommend it to anybody. Go see the movie. It's really fun. You don't need to be an F1 fan to understand it. They do a good job of creating the storylines and bringing you along and making you know what's going on. If you are an F1 fan, there's some fun little Easter eggs and things in there that you'll get. But totally recommend that movie. And if you're like where Kevin and I are, and it's 1 billion friggin' degrees outside, sitting inside on a Sunday afternoon in the air conditioning, not the worst thing in the world.
It was cool here today. Like,
was it? Good for you.
Yeah.
One here.
Down here, I mean, it didn't even get to 90 today. So
I think it's still 90 here.
So, did you see Gran Turismo, the movie?
No, I did not.
Okay, I was just curious on how it kind of played. And obviously, they're different, stories,
Yeah.
But just kind of seeing how the action, if you will, paired up.
I thought the cinematography was great, and I enjoy it. I mean, I love what F1 is. And it's hard to compete with what is already a pretty good access sport in terms of camera views. Like, they have helmet cam, they have, car cams, they have, the videos, the cameras that look back at the driver from the cockpit. So it's, if you watch F1, like those are views you already have, and they kind of promote to ride on board with certain drivers throughout the course of a race. Like, that's a promotion that they do throughout the course of a race, and practice sessions and qualifying. So it was like, okay, how are you going to make this, like, how are you going to incorporate all of those that we're normally used to seeing as fans of the sport? And I thought they did a good job. And I went and saw it in IMAX, and it was loud. It was great. Obviously motor racing, that's part of it, is the feeling of it as well. And I thought they did a good job of doing that. And they told a good story. I thought it was a good story. It is unrealistic, but it was a good story.
No, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So we did have some football news come across earlier in the week, right? That does have some fantasy implications, right? Little
I
trade went
forgot about that.
Mhm.
and the Steelers. And I remember not that long ago when we were talking about Jonnu Smith and we mentioned that, hey, keep an eye out because there's rumors. Well, those rumors are no longer rumors, and Jonnu Smith is now a Pittsburgh Steeler, and seemingly puts a little bit of a damper on both Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith this season. But you talk about a player that seemingly just kind of gravitates towards where Arthur Smith is. That would be Jonnu Smith.
Yeah, it probably takes the ceiling out of both those guys, but I almost wonder if it raises the floor just with how Pittsburgh wants to play, right? So you have DK as the X, and then you're basically running two tight end most of that game anyway. And now Aaron Rodgers has some of those short route dump offs where he doesn't have to worry about getting on the exact same page with DK right away. The two of them can develop some chemistry, but then he has a couple sure-handed tight ends who are good blockers to protect him, as well as they release well into routes, right? Jonnu, kind of a late bloomer to fantasy in a lot of ways because he blocked so well um, in Tennessee with Arthur Smith and kind of going that route before his emergence last year. And Pat Freiermuth thrived under an older, check down oriented Ben Roethlisberger, right? He jumped onto the scene, and we thought we were getting kind of fantasy gold there with Pat Freiermuth, and hasn't really quite duplicated those numbers yet. So, I mean, it's maybe not the ideal situation. It definitely dumbs the ceiling for Jonnu in what we were talking about here last week with him being kind of in that top 10. So I definitely think you need to, push him down the list here just a little bit. But the tight end is a position that Aaron Rodgers will use. So there is some silver lining there. We've seen Aaron Rodgers use tight ends quite a bit. Tyler Conklin, and not Bubba Franks. That was Brett Favre.
Bobby Tonyan.
Yes, Bobby Tonyan. Yes, that's who I see. Tight end 4? His top finish
2.
was
He was tight end 2 once.
tight end 2. Okay, there, even better. So Rodgers can facilitate a tight end with a leading receiver. So I don't know that it's as bad as people would initially think, but it is going to be some pick your poison because I don't think both those guys are ever going to go off in the same week.
I think the other key thing that kind of shakes up tight end rankings is because Jonnu Smith has vacated Miami, the Dolphins went out and traded for the previously retired Darren Waller, who now all of a sudden comes out of retirement because he thought that he would rather not play football than play football for the New York Football Giants. He comes out of retirement to now join that Dolphins team. It's intriguing, right? It's an offense that can support a good pass catching tight end, and Darren Waller has proven that. Does he kind of work his way up into taking over where Jonnu Smith was being ranked? You're both shaking your head.
No, he doesn't block. Darren Waller's never been more than a slightly subpar blocker, and more often than not, he was a little bit less. That's not how the Raiders used him. That's not how the Giants tried to use him like that, and it kind of failed miserably. Even with Daniel Jones was getting smoked, and when Darren Waller was their blocking tight end, that's what prompted them to draft so many tight ends here over the last couple seasons. So he'll get some chances, but I think what it does is it narrows the route tree again. Like, you're going to see a lot of Achane, a lot of Tyreek, and probably a bit more Jalen Waddle, maybe than what we saw the last couple years. So if anything, I'd tell you the biggest bump might be for Jalen Waddle. If I just had to speculate on that here right now, I don't think that Darren Waller is going to be making moves. It seems more like the Mike Gesicki 2.0 move than what we got out of Jonnu.
Right. I honestly think Jonnu would have had a hard time replicating what what we saw last year in that offense, right? Like, a lot of that production I think had to do with the fact that you had so many folks just kind of banged up all along that offense, right? Like Tyreek bounces back and returns healthy, right? Like, came out that he was dealing with a wrist injury all season long. Jalen Waddle dealing with his own stuff, right? Like, if those two return to form, one of those that your tight end is now back to being the third, maybe fourth targeted guy in the offense, and just not seeing the volume there. So I don't know that moves the needle much for me for Darren Waller, other than that potential late round dart throw in a best ball. So, any hoozles. We're not talking tight ends tonight. We're talking on the running backs and really kind of looking at running backs 2 and running backs 3 type of deal in a lot of cases for your fantasy roster, and even in some cases running back 4. So we'll kind of get rocking and rolling into that, unless we have any other thoughts or anything else we want to hit up here on the on news notes.
No.
All right. Let's go ahead and we'll just hop right in. We'll start with number 40 and work our way towards the number 1 spot there, and really kind of looking at these based off of average draft position and where guys are kind of going in a best ball, and utilizing that as you're kind of updating that, since those are where things are kind of moving and grooving here still early in the season here. So we're going to go ahead and start with running back 40 on that list, and that was Tajay Spears. Tajay Spears last year, 84 attempts, 312 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, 35 targets, 30 receptions, 224 yards, and 1 touchdown through the air. Thoughts on Tajay Spears?
I think if Tajay is able to stay healthy and not miss 4 games like he did last year, we probably do see a bit of a tick up for Tajay, especially with Cam Ward playing quarterback. I think that could lead to some good things, but he is a smaller back. He's a bit more explosive. Like, sometimes that grind, right, of how they're running him does take effect. But I think that there's some upside in the passing game. So in half point or full point PPR leagues, I think there's some intrigue there as kind of a later round flyer for a running back who can catch a few passes out of the backfield and has enough burst to be able to break loose. So mild intrigue, but I think somewhere between that 33 and 38 is kind of where he fits, right at that RB3 kind of cutoff, and I think that's just kind of where Tajay Spears lives.
Yeah, there is mild intrigue because of the quarterback situation there in Tennessee, right? Like that, there is mild intrigue. What he has going against him is it wasn't just one injury that kind of hampered him last year. It was concussions, a hamstring strain, an ankle sprain, like that. That ended up costing him a couple different games in a couple different areas of the season. So there's the inconsistency there. You'd like to think that Tennessee is going to run the football. We'll see what this team looks like, but with Cam Ward, like, you think that running the football is going to be a priority for them. And we know that Tony Pollard is not like the guy back, like he needs a support. He needs a support system in order to be a running back 1 in terms of an NFL roster. He needs help, and he can't do it all by himself. So there is mild intrigue. I think at the right spot, you get a little bit of value just based on the quarterback situation in Tennessee. But he's not a guy I'm going out and targeting. But if I'm looking around there, he's somebody that I will kick the tires on and see if it's at the right spot.
Fair enough. This is one of those that I feel you're kind of drafting him about where he's going to finish, right? Like this seems very much a fair value type of thing for me. I don't know that you're going to see, right? Like even without the injuries, I don't know that we see much more in the way of work for Tajay Spears, right? Like I think ceiling wise, you're looking at maybe 10 touches a game. And if he's only getting 10 touches a game, you're gonna need a little bit better efficiency out of that one. And we didn't really see much in the way of efficiency last year on this one. So when it's all said and done, I think that you're gonna get, right about running back 40 and yeah, I think I probably have him as the range of outcomes running back 35 to 40 is kind of about where I'm seeing that one. So some slight value. If you're drafting Pollard and you're looking for a handcuff, potentially there, but this is a guy that I'm willing to just to kind of let sit on the waiver wire and let somebody else deal with that one. And because there's a good chance that somewhere through the season, I'll be able to pick him up and, spot start him if I need to off the waiver wire. Any other thoughts on Tajay Spears? All righty. Let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Ramondre Stevenson. And Ramondre Stevenson last year, 207 attempts, 801 yards, 7 touchdowns, had 33 receptions on 41 targets, 168 yards through the air, and 1 touchdown. Thoughts on Ramondre Stevenson?
So Ramondre had a case of the fumbles, right? Ramondre just has a case of the fumbles. He fumbles at bad times. He had the opportunity to kind of solidify this backfield and to have it be its own. And he just couldn't quite do it. 23 season, he played nicked up a little bit. We thought we'd see some better production out of him this year. And holistically, we got there, right? I mean, tight end, running back 27, so just outside of RB2 territory. More often than not, he was going higher than that, but I think a lot of us kind of saw the writing on the wall here with his drops and how abysmal that offense was going to look. That fitting just outside of running back 2 kind of fit where we thought he was going to be. Honestly, I think this year is probably going to be more of the same. He was averaging through 15 games played, he averaged just about 17 touches per game. I think you see that slide down to probably 13 touches per game. We expect New England to be a bit better this season. Drake May taking a step forward. Their defense a little bit more solidified with Mike Vrabel being the head coach. So I do think that it leads to more opportunities late in games. But then it's going to come down to Henderson or Stevenson. And if they go the hot hand approach, or if Stevenson can control those fumbles and he secures the ball, maybe they lean on the veteran presence a bit more. So, 30, this seems about right to me, right around RB3 territory, because him and Henderson are both going to see touches there. And I don't know that outside of an immense amount of red zone work and double-digit touchdowns is going to propel him up into a, high-end RB3, low-end RB2, but he needs all those touchdowns to make it happen. The volume on its own is not going to do it because he's not an amazing pass catcher.
It's so frustrating because his first game last year, and I had a lot of Ramondre Stevenson last year because I thought he was, lead back for a team that was going to run the football because Drake May wasn't going to be getting it done through the air. So I thought Ramondre Stevenson was like my diamond in the rough last year. And week 1, he proved me so right. And then he couldn't hold on to the football. So it was pretty brutal. From there out, he did so well that the Patriots said we need to draft a running back in the second round this year. That's how well Ramondre Stevenson did. So I still think there's a chance there, but man, I'm backing way off of Ramondre Stevenson this year just because they did bring in the rookie. They do have kind of a crowded backfield as it stands. Antonio Gibson is there, so they've got a lot of experience. Travion Williams. Also in that backfield as we sit here and talk about this on July 1st. So, I mean, it's crowded. Ramondre, I think has to earn that number one spot. We do know, I for all the reasons that you said, Kevin, about Vrabel coming to town, kind of gives me hope that the running game will improve. But I just think that there's 2 running backs that'll do it instead of one Derrick Henry, who is a freak, right? We get that. But like we saw how Vrabel would like to use that, or like the at least the way that he wants that offense to look with a running back and a running game. So I don't know. Like Ramondre Stevenson should be a heck of a lot better than he is and was last year. Don't get caught up in the fact that he is presumably a starting running back in this league because he's going to be playing kind of looking forward and looking backward at the same time at the guy who's trying to replace him.
Yeah, potentially, right? Like I think that you could see Ramondre Stevenson return value where he's coming off the board, right? Like not tremendous value, but I think there's still some value to be had with this pick here. One of those where he's coming off the board at running back 39. It wouldn't surprise me at the end of the season that we see him get to running back 30 or better, right? Like I'm kind of thinking more in that RB 25 to RB 30 range is kind of where I'm seeing him. So some potential value out of this one. I think that you're going to see, probably very similar when it comes to yardage, somewhere between 700-800 yards. I do think that he's going to get the crack at the goal line work on this one and get some early down work on this for this offense. So I think you're probably going to see 700-800 yards on the ground and probably about 6-7 touchdowns when the season's all said and done. It is one of those though that you're going to have to very much kind of temper expectations because this is going to be a bit of a hard ride to potentially figure out which games to start him in. That's kind of where I'm seeing the downside on this one is if you've got him on your roster, you're going to have that, I started him and he didn't do anything, or, oh man, he went crazy on my bench. Like that's what I think that you're going to see is a lot of kind of up down roller coaster type of performance week in, week out. And it's going to be very touchdown dependent heavy when it's all said and done. Any other thoughts on Ramondre Stevenson? All righty. Let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Javonte Williams. And Javonte Williams last year, 139 attempts, 513 yards, 4 touchdowns on the ground, 70 targets, 52 receptions, 346 yards to the air. Thoughts on Javonte Williams?
So Javonte was used more as a receiver than I think I was anticipating last year. And I don't think he's going to see 52 receptions in this Dallas offense. And maybe I'm not looking at it correctly, but I don't know that he's going to see 52 receptions out there. Now, the good thing is the door is wide open in Dallas, right? It really is wide open in Dallas. So Javonte says he feels more like himself a year, or I guess 2 years removed from the ACL injury. So that could be good news. And we could, see him take the lion's share. Last year, he was really used only about 55% of the time as the season went on between Audric Estime and Julian McLaughlin and Javonte Williams, right? It's kind of a 3-headed back that the Broncos deployed last year. So there's some opportunity, but even with that, if his explosiveness isn't there, don't be surprised if Jaden Blue starts to creep into those carries in some different situations. So yes, Javonte has some upside. I do think he'll see plenty of goal line work in Dallas. Being kind of the biggest and most powerful back on this Dallas team. So we could see those touchdowns kick up a bit from 4 to 6, maybe 7. But it's really going to come down to overall usage, right? Can he get to 215 carries and still maintain about 40 to 45 receptions and kind of elevate there? So I think there's some potential upside for him to get into kind of that, kind of where you had Ramondre, Derek, right? Somewhere between that 25, maybe 24 to kind of, 28, 29 type range, just outside of RB2 territory. But I think we'll see a better season than last year from Javonte, but I just don't know that we're going to see, a magical year that we thought we're getting when he came out of North Carolina and the Broncos picked him, right? He hasn't quite lived up to that.
Yeah, again, crowded backfield. He's going to have to earn the job. I think that's what's scaring a lot of people with why he's being drafted where he's being drafted. If he wins this job, right, and is able to kind of hang on to it, I mean, I think it's a firm RB2, right? And we're talking about him being drafted in RB3 territory, like. But that's a big if, and we're gonna have to pay attention to what's coming out of Cowboys camp and how we're thinking that this is all gonna shake out, because it is Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders and Jaden Blue, who Kevin, I know you're kind of big on and hoping that he's the one who kind of emerges out of that three-headed monster down there. So I mean it's interesting. We'll see how it all pans out, but like if he's the Dallas Cowboys starting running back, like RB2 should be the floor. Like he shouldn't be worse than RB24 overall as the Dallas Cowboys starting running back. Like that's just how I look at it. But I just don't know if that's where he's going to be.
Right, and you make a great point there, right? With Rico Dwaddle last year managing to get inside of that, and right, the performance there was so good that he's now on another roster, right? With the Cowboys going out, finding guys and bringing them in to replace him, right? But Javonte, I think that like this is going to depend upon what Javonte we get, right? Is this the Javonte that can find a little bit of that juice to be that guy that's just impossible to bring down and is a tackle breaking machine, right? Like if we get some semblance of that and we see somewhat of a return to that, I do think that you're going to see him get the goal line work and really be able to solidify himself as a back end RB2, top end RB3 type of territory there, right in that kind of range that Kevin was talking about. I'm probably seeing that range a little bit more in the like 22 to 30 range is kind of where I've got him, kind of what I'm thinking, how that's gonna look and work. But that's optimal situation, right? If he, if we see what we saw last year in Denver, like you're drafting him at the ceiling is really where that's going to come to be, because they're not going to utilize him and keep going back to him in that scenario. So Javonte is one that I do like the potential. I do think that there's some value here, but it's also one of those that you need to proceed with a little bit of caution. But this is a guy that if you're going out with like a hero RB or a zero RB strategy, like this is a guy that I'd be looking to try and put on the roster to put something together and get that short-term season beginning type of thing while I'm searching for who's going to ultimately be that running back to emerge that I can try and add to the roster there. Any other thoughts on Javonte? All righty. Let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Zach Charbonnet. And Zach Charbonnet last year, 135 attempts, 569 yards, 8 touchdowns, 52 targets on and 42 receptions, 340 yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. Thoughts for Zach Charbonnet?
So I'm a little worried about Zach Charbonnet this year. Not because he hasn't been good, but because of the change in offensive philosophy in Seattle. They are going to that kind of zone read one cut scheme that really does fit Kenneth Walker a ton. I really like Kenneth Walker this year because of that scheme. Charbonnet does not fit that as well. He's more of a power gap kind of running back. So if Walker goes down, then I think, yes, he becomes an extremely valuable handcuff. Like Charbonnet just is. He's an elite handcuff. And I think he's someone that, if you're getting looking for running back depth, he's an absolute piece that you want to have, especially with kind of how this Seattle offense is looking like it could shake out this year. So there's some upside in that, but I don't know that you're going to see the 22 carries for 134 yards and 2 touchdowns again, like he had last year against Arizona. Like, even if he has the starting job, it's just a little bit different scheme than what he's ever run before. I'm not quite sure he's going to be so comfortable. We're going to have to see how his vision plays out in this zone blocking scheme, since he hasn't run behind that before. So there's a lot of questions with Charbonnet this year. I think the raw talent is still there. He's a very solid running back. I think a lot of cases he could be a sufficient starter for a couple different NFL teams. But in Seattle, he's behind Kenneth Walker. It's never been kind of the 1-2 punch that we thought it might be. Kenneth Walker, when healthy, does seem to dominate those touches, and I think this year will be kind of more the same. So I'm not as high on Charbonnet this year as I have been. So I'd tell you where he's going off the board is probably the ceiling of where I would draft him. Like, I'm hoping to get a discount and then play into the upside. But I'm definitely not drafting him, above, RB 36, or, I'm making sure I want to try and get him in the 40s if possible, and really capitalize on the potential upside of being in a run heavy offense.
I agree with all of that. And just to add to kind of the handcuff thing, if you do have Kenneth Walker, you have to be paying attention to when this area of the draft comes up, because you don't want to miss out on the handcuff. Otherwise, you're going to miss out on those points, right? Like, you know that when Kenneth Walker goes down, you're going to have Zach Charbonnet go in. So that's just something that you have to pay attention if you're going to have Kenneth Walker, if you're going to draft him. And he's going, I mean, we're not going to talk about Kenneth Walker tonight, but, if you draft Kenneth Walker, pay attention when you get into this part of the draft, because you're going to want to not miss out on Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly something to that, right? With the Zach Charbonnet being a when he saw the opportunity last year, right? He certainly stepped up and delivered fantastic games. This is one of those, though, that, right, from a draft capital and where I'm looking to go with, right? Like, do I really want to take a handcuff with a single digit pick, like a top 10, and really what I mean, a single digit round pick? And that's really where you'd have to draft him, is you're going to have to draft him in like the 9th round. There's other places that I would rather still be filling out my roster and get better depth on that than drafting my handcuff for the running back I took in the 4th round with my 9th round draft pick, right? Like, I get Alex's point, and it makes a lot of sense, but from a draft capital standpoint and how that looks to be, like, 9th round, I'm not looking to handcuff my 4th round running back. I'm looking to, potentially be filling in my quarterback. I'm looking at, put in my tight end. Like, I'm looking to fulfill starting pieces, not a handcuff that has very little standalone value. So that's just kind of how I build teams and my thoughts there. But any other thoughts on Zach Charbonnet?
No, he's kind of one of those guys that if you draft Kenneth Walker, you want Walker to dominate touches for like the first 3 or 4 weeks, and then see if somebody drops Charbonnet because they're frustrated with it, or if you can get him on the cheap as like some trade bait for a handcuff or something like that. Like, I can see that train of thought, right? Just because of when you're having to draft him, but he is a guy that you want to at least know where he's about and kind of what he's doing if you're a Walker owner.
Right.
Not saying that you have to draft him, but I'd definitely be having a little check mark next to his name, or however your format kind of shakes up, so that way you can just go in and just kind of keep a finger on the pulse there.
Agreed. All righty, let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Cam Scatabo. And Cam Scatabo, the rookie coming into the Giants, a 4th round pick. Thoughts on Cam Scatabo?
High energy, high motor guy. I think he's gonna see a role in New York, right? How big or small that is, kind of we'll figure that out, and kind of his lack of sheer speed at the combine, I think soured some people just a little bit. But you go back and turn the film on, and it's like he has a different gear in the games than what he did in the combine. So I'm interested in Cam, right? And you want to talk about 8th, 9th round running back, right? In 9th round, like I could be interested in Cam. Again, we expect him to see the goal line work because of his physical presence. I think he'll be able to receive the ball fairly well at the NFL level, but really what I'm interested in is his blocking ability, because that's what's going to lead to his playing time. Like they'll have some packages for him, and yeah, he'll probably get a shot at the goal line or whatever. But if he can stand in on 3rd down and take on the blitzing linebacker, I think that will kind of give us an insight to how much he is going to be on the field here this rookie season. So um, I, I enjoy watching the kid. I mean, just ultimately, I enjoy watching the kid. So I hope he does really well, because I think I think he's a guy that's easy to root for when you're watching football on the TV and you want him to succeed. I just need to see it translate a little bit. But again, in the 9th round, coming off about what 107 ish, coming pick 107, so the 9th round, I'm intrigued enough, right? Hopefully my roster is built enough that okay, I could draft Cam here and maybe keep my eye on a couple guys that are further down the list who are not covering tonight, who I like, with kind of that same or maybe even a little bit greater opportunity. They just don't have the young, new kind of name buzz to it. But I am interested. For sure. I like him.
So it's going to be tough for Cam to get onto the field, right? You've got Devin Singletary in front of him. Tyrone Tracy Jr. is there in that backfield as well. So
I don't think you're worried about Singletary. I'd worry about Tracy a little bit. Singletary, he's just a guy.
Sure, but he's also there, and that's one of the thing that you have to. I mean, he's there for a reason. So I think that Scatabo is going to have to figure out, like you said, Kevin, how to block. That's the way that as a young running back, that's how you get on the field, right? Is you're able to block and protect that quarterback, and then you can get the carries and make sure that you get the work. So, I hope he does do well, because he is fun to watch. I think it's going to be a little difficult this year, but where he's going is totally worth, as you were saying, Kevin, it's worth the flyer.
Right.
At least then you have the rooting interest, right? And that's fun.
No, I mean, that's absolutely. This is a guy that is probably one of the bigger wild cards from where folks are going in this kind of range of outcomes there, right? Because Tyrone Tracy is not that much farther ahead of him, about a round sooner on that one. Tyrone Tracy, well, he had an okay rookie season. Certainly didn't do anything to really lock up that job long term, right? To the point where they added some depth, they added another guy to come in and compete for that role. This is one of those that Cam Scatabo, I think, is going to be a very wide ranging possibility of outcomes here, right? Like this is one of those that we could look up at the end of the season and we see him running back 50 when it's all said and done, right? We could look up and we could easily see him supplant both Tracy and Devin Singletary and become the primary lead back in this offense. And we're now talking about a top 20 running back when it's all said and done. Like there's really is a very wide range of outcomes on this one. I tend to lean a little bit more towards we're dealing with some value on this one, and not going to surprise when we look up and we see him flirting with fringe running back 2 territory. So again, another guy that I think is being undervalued when we're drafting here, and could see outperform this. And with where he's coming off the board with the 9th round pick, I'm absolutely saying yes, please, and smash draft and move on. Any other thoughts on Cam Scatterbo? All righty, let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Jordan Mason. And Jordan Mason last year, 153 attempts, 789 yards, 3 touchdowns, 11 receptions on 14 targets for 91 yards. Thoughts on Jordan Mason?
So Jordan Mason started out really hot last year, right? McCaffrey wasn't playing. Mason got shot out of a cannon, RB3, RB8, 25 against the Rams. Okay, then RB4. And then after that, he was an RB3 or worse the rest of the season, right? Part of it was the injury. He got shut down early because of the shoulder. Really kind of seemed like he couldn't take like the grind, whether it was the San Francisco style of offense, whether it was just his body just isn't equipped for it as well. So I'm interested to see how this plays out, because I think he's a nice little change of pace from Aaron Jones, but I think Aaron Jones is probably going to dominate these touches over Jordan Mason. And aside from an injury, which could happen, but you don't ever plan on injuries, but aside from an injury, I think this is like the ceiling for Jordan Mason. They gave Aaron Jones a new contract there in Minnesota. Yes, they brought Mason in, but he's 26, has a ton of tread left on his tires, right? He hadn't been used a whole hell of a lot, but Shanahan kind of has a way of getting some things out of running backs that other teams can't once he moves on, or once they move on. And I'm wondering if this is another one of those situations, right? He's going to spell them in. He's going to have, maybe 120 to 150 touches. And it's a kind of a big range, but again, injury dependent throughout the season. He's not a big receiver though. So he's not going to be on in passing downs. That's Aaron Jones. He's not as good of a pass blocker as Aaron Jones. That's what Aaron Jones did starting in Green Bay. He blocked, leaked out, and then they'd put him on a wheel route when they wanted to get creative, and Rodgers would just, pinpoint him. It was crazy. So I'm struggling to see the usage here and how this is going to work for a young quarterback and in JJ McCarthy, with a new offense for Jordan Mason behind a guy that they liked enough to re-sign him after the age of 30. Like there's a lot of things that are pointing to too much hype in Jordan Mason here at the moment. So I'd probably be fading him at this current ADP. If he falls down into the 40s, maybe I'd take a look, but I'm not touching him in round 8.
Don't overthink Jordan Mason. He's a handcuff candidate, and I think that's probably how you need to look at him, because he's going to be playing second fiddle in an offense that's going to run the football. But like you said, Kevin, it's Aaron Jones, and then it's the rest of them, and Jordan Mason leads the rest of them. So that's what you need to be paying attention to, and quite honestly, you don't need to spend too much for Aaron Jones. So it's intriguing to me why Jordan Mason is this high. Maybe it's just because we anticipate that the Vikings are going to run the football. But he is a handcuff in my opinion. He's a handcuff. His standalone value comes when Aaron Jones isn't available.
Yeah, I would agree with that, right? This is if I wasn't willing to spend 9th round capital on Zach Charbonnet to handcuff my 4th round running back of Kenneth Walker, I'm certainly not going to do it for Aaron Jones, my 6th round draft pick, to handcuff him with the 9th rounder, right? Like that makes less sense to me as well, right? Jordan Mason, yeah, there's a lot of talk about him being the 1B to Aaron Jones 1A. I don't see it. I think that we'll see a change of pace, and we'll see some of that, but I don't think this is going to be a 55-45 type of split in this backfield. I think this is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 to 70, leaning on the Aaron Jones route, and Jordan Mason picks up the rest. So I'm Yeah, at that point, I'm pretty well out on Jordan Mason this year. The guy that I'm willing to be wrong. I feel like you're drafting him at his ceiling, short of an Aaron Jones injury. Any other thoughts on Jordan Mason?
To go back to your point, Derek, about not spending the capital for Zach Charbonnet where he's going for where Kenneth Walker's going, I do think that Aaron Jones is going probably lower than he should, but we'll save that for later in the episode.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Any other thoughts here on Jordan Mason? All right, let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Najee Harris. And Najee Harris brought into the Chargers, coming over from the Steelers. And last year with Pittsburgh had 263 attempts, 1,043 yards, 6 touchdowns, 36 receptions on 48 targets for an additional 283 through the air. Thoughts on Najee Harris?
So I'm grabbing Najee everywhere I can get him. And here's why. There's enough of a break between where Hampton is going and where Najee's going. And let's think about this coaching staff real quick. Jim Harbaugh does not overly want to invest in rookies, right? Like he wants to get their feet wet and bring them in and kind of go. And they have Najee Harris on a prove-it deal. And I think they're just going to run him into the ground. I think they're going to feed Najee early and often. Hampton will see some packages for sure, but I am grabbing Najee because I think there's tremendous value with where Najee's going as the 34th running back off the board. And I could see him finishing, RB 17 to 22 in this Chargers offense, right? He can pass block. We know he plays, he grinds. He falls forward. He's not super explosive, right? And then that's kind of one of the knocks on Najee. He hasn't been super explosive. But what the Chargers are going to offer Najee Harris is a passing game to keep 8 and 9 out of the box consistently. And that is not anything that he's had in Pittsburgh here the last couple of years. So he is actually going to see a lighter front in a offense that's a little bit more diversified. And I think that Najee Harris is I don't know if he's technically a sleeper candidate being RB 34, but he is definitely a targeted player for me as I am thinking about where I can get guys and what kind of value that they could offer. I'm jumping all over Najee. I love him this year.
I like the last two words you said there because I distinctly recall, I might be wrong, but I distinctly recall my co-host last year telling Najee Harris to get as far away from his rosters as humanly possible because he was bad. He was bad in Pittsburgh and it wasn't getting any better. But am I right in that, Kevin?
There's definitely some of that, right? We saw obviously the Jaylen Warren hype and the way that the Steelers were using him, and it was just he'd get on a little bit of a run and then they'd pull him, or he'd have two carries that were right up the gut, and because he didn't bust him for 15 yards, it feels like they pulled him, and then they found every reason possible to get Jaylen Warren in the game, and it was frustrating as hell. So what a change of scenery can do in a year, right? And flip the script.
A year removed from that situation, right? On a new team, a year removed, on a team that you're right. I think they are going to run him into the ground on the prove it deal, and I think he's going to try to prove it. So we love a guy on a contract here. I think where he's going is wonderful, and he's got to finish above that. I do think that there's going to be, some competition there, but I think it's Najee's backfield until it isn't.
So last year he had 299 touches. Okay, 263 rushing attempts and 36 receptions. 299. Over or under 299 and a half. Still in a split backfield, just with a different team.
Give me the over.
I'm going to go slightly under. I'm thinking like 280s, kind of where I'm projecting.
I think he sees 320 touches this year.
Potentially.
That's why I am hyped on him. I think he far surpasses that.
Yeah, very well could
Again,
be.
it's just how I see it playing out. But
Right.
Najee's a guy that I'm licking my chops, waiting for him to fall to me so I can pick him up.
Right. Najee's a guy that I really like where he's going. This is a guy that's right coming off the board at running back 34. I could very easily see him finish inside of running back 20 when it's all said and done, right? Like there's tremendous value for me on this one here. And right, you guys mentioned Greg, you mentioned Harbaugh and how they like to kind of run that offense, things like that. I'll kind of take a slightly different approach and take a look at the offensive coordinator in Greg Roman, who last time that had kind of a talented rookie coming in with J.K. Dobbins back in the 2020 season. Gus Edwards still managed to outsnap him and get more carries at the running back position on this one. So these are head coach and offensive coordinator do see things very, very similarly here, to the point where it's not going to surprise me that Najee Harris out opportunities Hampton when it's all said and done here. And that was even back in 2020 when J.K. Dobbins was getting a one more full yard per attempt than Gus Edwards back then. And didn't really even matter with the hot hand approach, things like that. Like they still rode the veteran there. And I see that continuing out here. So I'm not quite as bullish as Kevin on the total opportunities there, but I do think that we're going to see a guy that gets a lion's share of this backfield and the running work here. And folks that are drafting Hampton, I think will be a little bit on the frustrated side when Najee ends up being a constant thorn in that side week in, week out. Any other thoughts on Najee Harris? Alrighty, let's go ahead and head on over and let's talk about Travis Etienne. And Travis Etienne last season, 150 attempts, 558 yards, two touchdowns, 39 receptions on 52 targets, 254 yards to the air. Thoughts on Travis Etienne?
It's funny that you did that, because basically the same guy in terms of how frustrating he is for your fantasy team. Go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, it was extremely frustrating last year, right? Because you go back to 23 and he was a top 5 fantasy back. And then you're expecting, the offense didn't really change that much. And so they bring in, and then all of a sudden, Tank Bigsby's coming out of nowhere and they're splitting carries, and Etienne is mostly regarded as second fiddle there for a stretch there in the middle of the season. And then by the end of the season, it's a true 1-2 punch. So the information coming out of Jacksonville has been weird, right? Like they've said that they view Etienne as kind of their lead back, but what does lead back truly mean? Or is it just coach speak? They drafted Tuin. Yeah. They drafted him, so they have 3 guys at running back that you can name between Bigsby, Etienne, and Tutton. There you go. Who they drafted. So I'm keeping an eye on Travis Etienne, especially if I'm drafting early, in hopes that maybe he does get dealt still, right, as you kind of get into things. But the closer we get to the regular season, I think the opportunity of him being traded away is diminishing here by the day. So that has me worried a little bit. I don't know. I'd tell you it's probably about where he's drafted. I think that's where he's going to end up. There's 3 guys in this backfield. They're all going to get some play. Tutton's going to play some special teams. You might see a little bit of special teams out of Tank Bigsby. But really, my guess is Bigsby and Etienne Jr. aren't going to be playing specials. So then they're just kind of splitting carries, right? And then it's a hot hand approach and seeing which one works. And I fought that battle last year, and it kept me awake at night trying to figure this one out. So this year I'm going to stay away from it. Maybe in a best ball format, I'll take a flyer on Travis Etienne, maybe. But with as much as I like Najee, as I just said, if both of them are on the board, I'm going to pass over ETN, and I'm just going to go right for Najee and call it good. So I like the player. I like his game. I hate his situation and the team he plays for, the system that he plays in. And so I just have no faith in what the Jags are doing here at running back right now. So he's a fade for me, but I'd tell you it's probably fair value where he's going off the board.
Yeah, I'm out on him in redrafts. If it's a best ball, sure. If it's a super deep, whatever. But like, I'm not touching Travis Etienne this year.
Yeah, this is a guy that I'm willing to be wrong on, right? Like when it's all said and done, I'm not going to surprise me if we see him, 500 yards, 5 touchdowns on the ground type of thing. The only way that I see him potentially raising, where he finishes is going to come through the passing work. And there's just too many questions that I've got with this Jacksonville offense as a whole that I'm just willing to be wrong. So with that, I'm not looking to put him on my roster. And there's a few guys going after him that we've already talked about that I'd rather go with. So Travis Etienne is a guy that will probably not be on many of my rosters this year. Any other thoughts on Travis Etienne? All right, let's go ahead and head on over to Tyrone Tracy. And Tyrone Tracy last year, 192 targets, or 192 attempts, 839 yards, 5 touchdowns, 38 receptions, 53 targets, 284 yards through the air, and 1 touchdown. Thoughts on Tyrone Tracy?
So the only thing that Tyrone Tracy did wrong last year was something out of his control. And it was that he played for a crappy offense. At 4.4 yards per attempt is above the median line there for the NFL, right? You want your guys over 4, right? He's getting 4, just under 4.5 yards a clip. So he did that. He was getting into the end zone, 5 touchdowns on the ground. Respectable for not being a thumper, right? He didn't see a whole lot of goal line work, so that was respectable enough. So this is the other side to the Cam Scatterbo line, right? Is Tracy didn't do anything to necessarily get usurped by anybody. They just need to be better on offense. And you believe that is going to happen with Russell Wilson coming in, with strengthening the offensive line. That defense in New York is really good, so they're going to see some opportunities, right? This team kind of just hangs around, especially with Russ at quarterback. He's not going to make massive mistakes. He'll take a couple too many sacks now, but he's not going to turn the ball over necessarily. So this is a difficult one for Tracy, right? I think that there's a little bit of upside as we see a step forward in New York's offense, but I don't think there's great upside. Like, I don't think that we are going to see him go from, RB 33 to RB 23. Like, I don't think we see that range. I think we could see him go from RB 23 to 33 to 27. Something like that. Still just on the outside of RB2 territory. Again, knowing that they're going to have some things for Cam inside this offense. But if he's able to keep this 4.4 or even improve upon that, it's going to drastically change it. And you will see a higher ceiling than maybe what's expected. The good thing about Tyrone Tracy is the more people talk about Cam Scatterbo, the more Tracy kind of falls down the list. And that's where I'm okay with grabbing him as he continues to kind of slip down the list, because everyone wants the new shiny toy and they kind of forget what Tracy can do, because the numbers are just convincing enough that he is worth another shot here in the 2025 season. Maybe a 0 RB approach, or a hero RB approach, right? Where you're getting one top guy and you're filling in with guys later down the list. Maybe that's where I'm looking to fill in with like a Tyrone Tracy and follow that back up, like a Najee, right? And just go back-to-back rounds, 8 and 9, and kind of call that good. So there's some potential play here, but overall, I don't know that the Giants offense is going to be, a top, 10 scoring offense. So points are still at a premium here. You need him to get into that end zone, 6, 7 times to really justify where he's going.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, is that he's got to find the end zone a few more times, and that's hard to predict what touchdowns are going to look like. But I don't mind taking him here, end of the 7th-ish round. Like I'm fine with that. I think he's going to be the lead back there in New York. I think they're going to be a better offense. I think where he's being drafted right now is probably closer to his floor than it is his ceiling, for sure. So I like it. I think it's a great value here at the back end of the 7th round. Like, sign me up.
Fair enough. I'm not quite as bullish on Tyrone Tracy there. I do think that this is about, this is probably about what you're going to get when you draft him, right? Is kind of that running back 30 to 35 kind of range, right? Like that's kind of where I see him going. This is a guy that certainly made some things happen and certainly kind of was a darling last year for fantasy, right? Guy that most folks didn't have on their draft board, and then managed to come through and give you a running back too at the season end. So he definitely did some really good things there. One of the things though that that wasn't necessarily the bright spot for him was the fact that he finished tied for 3rd for most fumbles at the position last season, right? Like we were talking earlier about Ramondre Stevenson and kind of fumbling the opportunity away. That very well could be the same thing with Tyrone Tracy here, with being tied for 3rd for most fumbles by a running back in 2024, right? Like this is one of those things that you want to see a head coach and offensive coordinator start pulling out their hair, put the ball on the ground and just watch what happens there, right? That could be, if that similar issue plagues him this season, that could very much open the door for Cam Skattebo and really supplant him in this role. But Tyrone Tracy is a very fun, very dynamic player to watch. Certainly has a lot of pop and a lot of explosive plays to it. But this is a guy that I think does have a little bit of risk baked in here with this, and some guys that I wouldn't mind kind of going a different route when it comes to this kind of draft position. Any other thoughts on Tyrone Tracy? All righty, let's go ahead and take a look at Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren last year, 120 attempts, 511 yards, 1 touchdown, 38 receptions on 47 targets, 310 yards through the air. Thoughts on Jaylen Warren?
I'm out. I don't want any part of it. Again, there's guys further down the list who have ceiling and a pathway to maybe a bit more effectiveness and being able to make a difference in a week as a flex player or some nature like that. Last year, yeah, you had the hamstring injury. Soft tissue injuries are kind of funky, right? Like sometimes they get them and they keep creeping up. Other times it's a one-shot deal. And again, we're not going to plan on injury, but somewhere between RB 30 and RB 40, like that's just where Warren's going to live, and especially with Rodgers at quarterback, I don't know. I'm not convinced that Warren necessarily fits what Aaron Rodgers typically does at the quarterback position. I could be wrong, but I'm willing to be wrong, to steal a phrase from Derek. I'm willing to be wrong on this one, and I'm not going anywhere near Jaylen Warren this year.
Yeah, it's tough because, like, I think on paper, again, lead back in a backfield, you'd think would just have built-in RB2, value, but I think it's going to be difficult for a path to find that for Jaylen Warren. I think it's crazy to me because we're going to talk about another guy here in 5 picks or 5 running backs time that is also on the same roster that I think is a bit more intriguing, which is crazy because I think it's the same story. So yeah, I think I'm probably out as well with Jalen Warren. I think that there's probably other options that I'm looking at that point. If I'm on the clock and he's best running back available, he's not the best running back available to me.
Yeah, for me, it's pretty well a hard pass on Jalen Warren, right? Like, this is a guy that couldn't supplant Najee last year. I think they upgraded at running back with Caleb Johnson here, and Jalen Warren is a guy that, quite frankly, if I'm only spending a draft capital in this kind of range, I want a guy that I think will get more than 10 opportunities a game, right? Like, and if I'm filling in as an RB3 as a flex type of play, like, I want somebody that's going to most likely that I think will get more than 10 opportunities a game in a heavily utilized week, right? And that's where I see Jalen Warren ceiling week in, week out. This is a guy that's going to have to rely on explosive plays and touchdowns to try and get him over the hump to get you into a usable fantasy week. And I just don't want to deal with that headache week in, week out. Any other thoughts on Jalen Warren? All righty, let's go ahead and head on over and take a look at Brian Robinson. And Brian Robinson last season, 187 attempts, 799 yards, 8 touchdowns, 20 receptions on 25 targets, for 159 yards through the air and 0 touchdown. Thoughts on Brian Robinson?
So if my draft looks a bit more balanced, and more often than not, I tend to lead towards that balanced approach, but if it is, like, I like Brian Robinson. Like, he's not going to see the reception totals, right? But he is pretty consistent as a runner. And we do expect everybody in Washington to take a step forward from what they were able to do last year. So I think this guy is pretty well cemented in. The Commanders didn't do anything at the running back position in free agency or the draft. They were focused more on the wide receivers. And then kind of along the big uglies there on the offensive and defensive line. So it really left Robinson alone and a clear pathway. So I do not mind him as, a RB3 perspective for my roster. Being able to step in on bye weeks, being able to fill in because of injury, maybe the matchup's just juicy, and you feel like you need to slide him into a flex spot. So I like Robinson. I think he's probably a little bit undervalued here. Missed 3 games last year and still finished inside the top 30. If he's able to get in, 15, 16 games instead of just the 14 that he played last year, I think you see that tick up even further. You're looking inside RB2 territory. So there's some upside built in there. So I like Robinson. I like the price tag and the slight value that's built in there.
So if you're in a super flex and you decide to go quarterback, wide receiver, and then you go running back in the 6th round, and Brian Robinson is there as you're coming around in the 7th round, how do you not take him? Right? Like, how do you not get that? And maybe you don't go 3 wide receivers in those middle rounds, but like, it feels like that's such an easy yes to drafting him there in the 7th round. Like, it just feels like there's return value there. So yeah, I'm in on him where he's going. I think it's a good value to me.
Yeah, I'm also a fan of Brian Robinson in this draft capital, right? This is a deal that it ultimately feels like you're kind of drafting him at his floor. Like, you're not going to get huge value upside on this thing, but I also don't think that you're going to get much less than an RB30 type of finish on the season. And this is a guy that's going to be pretty reliable week in, week out. Like, this is a guy that you can have in there as your flex, even as your running back too, and he's going to return a usable week for you, and be just kind of that very steady Eddie type of guy that you can fit in there. So I like him at this position. Any other thoughts on Brian Robinson Jr.? All right, let's go ahead and take a look at Isaiah Pacheco. And Isaiah Pacheco last year, 83 Rush attempts 310 yards, 1 rushing touchdowns, 12 receptions on 16 targets for 79 yards. Thoughts on Isaiah Pacheco?
So I'm out on Isaiah Pacheco because of his running mate that is going basically, what is it, 8 rounds after him. So I am going after Kareem Hunt. So Kareem Hunt's going off the board at 196 overall. So 120 picks later, 10 rounds. 10-round discount for a split-headed backfield. I'm going to take the value with Kareem Hunt, so I'm out on Pacheco. And Pacheco was great until he's not, but he's a physical, violent runner. He gets dinged up. He's yet to play a full season, and when he came back last year, Kareem Hunt was already cemented, and they just kind of split it 1-2. So having Hunt at the beginning of the season, I see no reason why Pacheco's just going to be automatically crowned the lead back when Kareem Hunt can do those same things, right? He's not as physical, but he's a little bit more elusive. His hands are a little bit better. He's a better pass blocker. Kareem Hunt does so many of these things, right, that I'm taking the value here, and I'm out on Pacheco because of that.
I want to be in on Isaiah Pacheco because I do think that there's the possibility where like he just takes control of that backfield that Andy Reid wants. Like Andy Reid wants that. But you're right, Kevin. He's a physical, violent runner that cannot stay healthy because of that, because of the way that he runs. And that's just, like there are some people that's just, it is a gift and a curse all wrapped into one. But with Kareem Hunt there, and with whatever this offense is going to look like again, and it feels like this offense needs to figure itself out, and it takes a while to figure itself out. It used to be that it was the Chiefs defense that took a while to figure itself out, and now it feels like it's the Chiefs offense that takes a while. So, or at least the last couple of seasons, that's what it's been. I wanted to be in on Pacheco, but I don't know that I can be, especially not where he's going. It's just going to be too much.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm for the most part, I do think that there's some value in this one. I don't know that there's tremendous value, but I think at worst case scenario, you're still getting what you're drafting with this one, right? So, Pacheco, I don't know that you're going to get much more than about 800 yards and maybe 8 touchdowns out of this thing, right? Kind of in that same vein of what we were just looking at Brian Robinson on. I don't know that Pacheco will be quite as consistent as Brian Robinson will be, but I think that they're going to be pretty similar for season output when it's all said and done. I do like Kevin's point that you can get the running mate at a severe discount, and so that does kind of lean me, kind of looking that way there. However, Pacheco going into a contract year, and remember, this is a guy that has been playing on a not very much money when you're talking NFL money here, and looking to get paid. So would not surprise me if we see Isaiah Pacheco have a very good season. But this is a guy that I think his ceiling is capped out at a low end RB2. Any other thoughts on Isaiah Pacheco? Alrighty, real quick. Let's. Did you want to hit up this comment here? That's one.
Yeah, Scott. So we touched on this at the beginning of the show, and basically what the consensus is, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong here, is Darren Waller came in. The trade that the Dolphins and the Steelers had was for Minkah Fitzpatrick. That's what the Dolphins wanted out of that. So they gave up Ramsey, who was kind of falling out of grace there, and Jonnu Smith, who the kind of the cap casualty in some ways, traded him off to get back with his buddy Arthur. They got Minkah Fitzpatrick because they really needed some safety help. Darren Waller coming in, they're filling the void, but none of us are expecting a whole lot out of Darren Waller. So he's not a exceptional blocker by any stretch. Being a year removed from the NFL, I think that there's some potential there where he gets some touches, but I think you're looking more at a tight end 2 than a top 10 tight end with where kind of Johnny was coming off the board. So there is a substantial break in what you saw between the two. And what my opinion was on that is I'm thinking Jalen Waddle is really going to be the beneficiary of a lot of those Jonnu Smith targets.
Right. Yeah. I think we're in store for a Mike Gesicki, Durham Smythe type of tight end performance when it's all said and done out of Darren Waller from a fantasy perspective. So real quick, Binkin saying that they're back. Have we already went over league winning Jordan Mason? The simple thought is we thought he's a very expensive handcuff and probably not going to end up on many of our rosters. Anyway, that's our thoughts on Jordan Mason. Kind of the opposite of a league winner. All right. Any other thoughts on that one? Or are we ready to go talk about Tony Pollard?
Tony Pollard.
All right. Let's go ahead and talk about Tony Pollard. And Tony Pollard last year, 260 attempts, 1,079 yards, 5 touchdowns, 41 receptions on 57 targets for 238 yards through the air. Thoughts on Tony Pollard?
Tony had a really good year last year, right? Kind of surprising in some regards, but he had just over 300 total touches, so that's probably a little bit much for Tony Pollard. I could see that kind of scaled back a little bit, but over 1,000 yards, good season. I think this year is going to be probably a little bit less. We'll see a bit of a regression out of Tony Pollard, rookie quarterback, some growing pains, that type of deal with the offense. So I don't think he's going to be as efficient, or maybe as efficient, but just not as many opportunities. So I don't want to bag on the guy because I do like Tony Pollard. I thought he got kind of a raw deal there in Dallas the year that he was kind of running the show there. But nevertheless, I do not suspect that we are going to see the RB, 2021 finish that we saw last year. I think it's going to be closer to this RB 28-29 spot that he's being drafted in currently.
Yeah, I agree with that. That like, kind of unfortunate that he will have it's outside forces that are gonna influence Tony Pollard more than Tony Pollard will. So I think where he is going is about where he's going to finish, and it is what it is at that point for Tony Pollard.
Fair enough. Tony Pollard did finish inside top 24 last year, so inside RB2 territory. It does slightly concern me when the coach comes out and says, "Hey, we probably ran this guy way too much last year. We need to be very aware of how many touches we're getting him." Not really the coach speak I want to hear in the offseason about a guy that I'm looking to draft to potentially be an RB2 or RB3 for me. So will they do that? It remains to be seen, right? It's nice to say that they want to go to a more balanced approach, a more split backfield approach, but we'll see what that thing actually looks like when the rubber starts meeting the road in the games. However, that is giving me a little bit of concern there, and I think that this is very much kind of you get what you get when you're drafting them here. I don't know that you're going to see much of a range of much higher of a range of outcomes. I think maybe you see him top out at RB23. I don't know that the Tennessee offense is going to be one that's going to be knocking on the door and in the red zone a fair bit, but it also wouldn't surprise me if we see Tony Pollard finish all the way down to RB32 type of thing. Like there's a very kind of big range of outcomes here on this one. But that being said, that he will likely give you some very usable weeks here. And this is a guy that if you're putting him on your roster as your third running back, that's a pretty smooth move there. Any other thoughts on Tony Pollard?
Negative.
Alrighty. Aaron Jones next up. Aaron Jones last season, 255 attempts, 1,300. I'm sorry, 1,000. Wow. Aaron Jones last season, 255 rushing attempts, 1,138 yards, 5 touchdowns, 51 receptions on 62 targets, 408 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Thoughts on Aaron Jones?
So Aaron Jones played all 17 games last year, did a really good job for the Minnesota Vikings, kind of balancing out this offense. Obviously, we kind of touched on Jordan Mason, and while we think he's not going at the right spot, he is going to be eating into some of this. But because Jordan Mason is not a great receiver of the football. I think what you could lose in rushing attempts, you might gain back in some receptions here, especially with the young quarterback. So instead of 255, I mean, if we call it 230 attempts, maybe 950 yards, but the receptions total ticks up closer to 58, maybe even 60. I think there's a possibility for him to finish inside the top 24 at the running back position. A lot of it's going to be touchdown dependent, but Aaron Jones, as we've seen in years past, has a knack for getting into the end zone. So it's really just going to be kind of how they feel comfortable with having their young quarterback call plays in the red zone, and whether they're going to be trying to feed the ball to Justin Jefferson, or whether they're going to take a little bit more conservative approach and hand a couple of those carries off to Aaron Jones. So I don't mind him as I really like him as an RB3. Honestly, if you can get him and balance your roster out right and have him as your RB3, I love it. I don't mind him as an RB2, but it's not where I feel safest.
Give me all the Aaron Jones this year. I like where he's going. I like the situation there. I like that it's a young quarterback. I like that he can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think that he is a guy that I am targeting, especially with where he's going. Give me all the Aaron Jones.
Yeah, I certainly don't mind Aaron Jones here, right? Like, this is one that we did see him get a career high in carries this last year. I don't know that we're going to see him duplicate that. Part of the reason I think that they brought in Jordan Mason was to help kind of alleviate some of that load. But again, this is one of those that it's not going to surprise me if we see him still get 200 plus attempts and still get up there around 60 passing targets on this one as well, right? Like, that certainly screams potential value on this one here. And this is a guy that, when it's all said and done, I do think will drastically outperform the running back 27 where he's going. I think that this wouldn't surprise me if we can see him flirt with a number in the teens for season end production here. And with that, I am very much in on Aaron Jones. And kind of where he's coming off the board, I do like the fact that I can add him in there as my running back 3, potentially running back 4, depending upon how I've drafted. And there's some tremendous value there if I'm able to utilize him as my flex running back or fill in RB2 should a week need it. But I very much like where he's coming off the board and the value here. Any other thoughts on Aaron Jones? All right, let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Caleb Johnson. And Caleb Johnson joining the Steelers as a rookie, coming in and replacing Najee Harris and joining Jaylen Warren in the backfield. Thoughts on Caleb Johnson?
Caleb Johnson will be the second highest rookie fantasy running back this year, behind Ashton Jeanty, in my opinion. I like Caleb Johnson a lot. Like, I see a guy who is a great pass blocker, who can catch out of the backfield, who keeps his balance and is able to break off the tackles, who has enough explosiveness to get into the second level very quickly and get on top of those safeties and corners. The way that Pittsburgh wants to play, Caleb Johnson fits right in coming from Iowa, right? The black and gold, just it's something with those color combinations. They like to just grind games and hit you right in the mouth and play good defense. Like Iowa is very much the college version of Pittsburgh. So I think he fits in really well. I had Caleb Johnson in a ton of dynasty leagues. I was grabbing him just about everywhere I could get my hands on him. And in redraft, I'm not scared to take him as the 26th back off the board. Like, I mean, again, much the same with Aaron Jones. If I could get him as my third running back, I'm super happy because I think there's a ton of upside there. With what we're going to be able to see, that Pittsburgh defense is good enough. We know that they're going to have opportunities. And Aaron Rodgers has really shown the ability in the fourth quarter. If he's winning the game, he doesn't care to throw the ball. Like this is the older, more mature version of Aaron Rodgers, as we all kind of chuckle about that. But I mean, if they're leading the game, he doesn't. His ego does not come into play in that situation, is what I'm trying to say. Maybe others, but not that particular situation. Rodgers wants to win, and if the best play is for him to turn around and hand it to Johnson and get 4.5, 5 yards a clip, maybe break one loose and salt the game away, they're going to be happy to do that. So I am very much a fan of Caleb Johnson this year.
And obviously you like him more than you like Jaylen Warren, as we've kind of just discussed.
Yeah. It's not even close.
And I think, yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Just because there's the style of play there. So yeah, he's good. 26 running back off the board, like as a running back 3. Yeah. Give me that one.
Yeah, the only thing that worries me with Caleb Johnson is the fact that I do see the ceiling a little bit capped, right? A little bit of limited upside with the fact that how I think they're gonna split out this role and have him be the 1-2 back and Jaylen Warren as the third down guy, right? So one of those that the passing work upside I think is a little bit capped there that could propel him way up there and be a tremendous value when it's all said and done. But that being said, I do think that Caleb Johnson is still going to get 200 plus attempts on the ground. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see him at 220 in rushing attempts and coming up just shy of 1,000 yards on the ground. Handful to 7 touchdowns right through that. So this is a guy that you're drafting as potentially your third running back that I think could easily perform at a running back 2 and potentially even sneak up there towards fringe RB1 territory when the season's all said and done. But it does slightly worry me just a little bit about that potential upside and that ceiling with the passing work on this one. Any other thoughts on Caleb Johnson? All right, let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Keyshawn Judkins. And Keyshawn Judkins is the newly running back to the Cleveland Browns, coming in the second round draft pick. Thoughts on Judkins?
I like Judkins. I think that him and Sampson out of Tennessee are going to be much closer to a just straight up 1-2 punch than what a lot of people are buying into here at the moment. We'll see how this plays out. The bottom line is, do any of us truly expect the Cleveland offense to be able to sustain a consistent running game week in and week out?
No.
Because I do not. I think their quarterback position still in flux, playing kind of merry-go-round there. They have 3 different backs between Ford and Judkins and Sampson there that they're trying to figure out. I think there's a lot of mouths to feed in that running back room. And so I just don't see the clear path right? He's not only fighting off one guy, he's fighting off two. So to try and say that, okay, you're going to be a fringe RB2 running back while holding off another rookie, but a veteran who's shown that he can do very well in that offense. You're not sure what's going on with the signal caller. I'm out. There's too many questions for me to invest in Cleveland running backs this year, so I'm going to pass.
There's so many questions for you to invest in Cleveland running backs this year, and sure, some people like to jump off of bridges with parachutes attached to them. Some people like to swim with sharks. I think you can get the same amount of rush and not knowing what the hell is going to happen to you by drafting anybody on the Cleveland Browns. So it's I don't know, if you draft him, good luck. And you deserve everything good and or bad that happens to you because you've taken that risk.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of those that the only thing that I think may save Judkins here a little bit is the fact that I think he will probably get the first and second down work as this thing comes to play, which, most of the drives that Cleveland gets will probably get to at least 2 downs. But this is not one of those that I'm looking to really try and add him onto my roster. This is one that I feel like you're probably drafting him about at the ceiling this year, and the floor could be far worse. There's several other guys that are going after him that I would rather take the flyer on this one. So I am pretty well out on Judkins. Any other thoughts on Judkins? All right. Let's go ahead and head on over and talk about DeAndre Swift. And DeAndre Swift last year, 253 rush attempts, 959 yards, 6 touchdowns, 42 receptions on 52 targets, 386 yards through the air. Thoughts on DeAndre Swift?
Kevin, before you go, if you looked up RB2 in the dictionary, it would be a picture of DeAndre Swift. This guy has been so consistent as an RB2 in his career.
Right.
That's what you get. What you see is what you get with DeAndre Swift.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's a guy that's you want some more efficiency out of his ground game, right? You want him to get over that 4 yards a carry. Last year, he wasn't quite able to do that. But his receiving work does kind of make up for some of that as far as the fantasy asset goes. There's a ton of mouths to feed in Chicago all of a sudden, right? And are we convinced that they have pulled all the correct levers to make Caleb Williams ready for this ascension and this next step? We're going to find out. Drafted another offensive line piece. Obviously, they put another weapon, 2 more weapons around him. And they didn't do anything the Bears didn't do anything to truly address the running back position. So Swift does seem to be pretty safe as a RB2 fantasy asset. You are just going to have to live with the fact that he has to get the receptions to be relevant, right? Because the 55 to 65 yards per game, and sometimes it's not even that, guys. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games last year with less than 40 yards rushing. That is no bueno. So it is intriguing in some regards because you feel like the Chicago Bears offense is up and coming and you want to be able to do that. In some ways, it's the safest piece of the Chicago offense because you're not guessing between 4 or 5 different pass catchers. You're just picking a running back. But because of all those pass catchers, does DeAndre Swift see the targets at the running back position? There's a ton of questions here. But I'm probably just going to fade him. It's uncertainty. I don't see a clear path for him to finish as RB20. So why would I want to gamble on the fact that he can finish above RB24? Like, there's just enough questions there that I will pivot. I will draft. Let's see, where he's going off the board at 68. I'll grab Caleb Johnson there. I'll grab Aaron Jones there, and feel more comfortable with either one of those two than I do with DeAndre Swift, just because of workload and offensive philosophy. So it's, again, my personal preference, but I'm probably going to be fading DeAndre Swift, as much as it pains me, right? He's a Georgia boy. I love my Bulldogs, but fantasy football is its own aspect. So I need to put the fandom aside here for a second, wish him the best of luck, and just hope he just doesn't blow up against me.
Yeah, I think like what you see is what you get, and he's gonna finish because he's given us no reason to believe otherwise. And yes, Kevin, there are a ton of mouths to feed. There's a lot going on in this running back room. There's wide receivers that were drafted highly that they need to see production of. There's a quarterback that needs to take that next step and develop his passing game and be a true NFL passer, right? But like DeAndre Swift has finished RB2 every single year he's been in the league. So in my opinion, if you're looking for an RB2, you've got one.
Yeah, and to that point, I do think that you kind of draft him at his floor here. I do think that there's some potential upside here. Not much, right? Because you're going to get I think honestly, you're going to get an RB 20 through 24 when it's all said and done, right? But you're drafting him at the floor here. One of the things that I think could potentially help, right? Like even if he's not necessarily getting some of the passing work, had a very inefficient season through the on the ground last season. I do think that we can see some of that potentially tick up there. Ben Johnson is now at the helm. Would like to potentially think that he can bring some of those similar type of things we've seen in Detroit the last few years with that running attack, bring that here to Chicago. And they've also reworked that offensive line here a little bit. So if we can see DeAndre Swift, still get still getting that 230 to 250 rushing attempts on this, and we see the uptick to yards per carry up in that 4.3, 4.4 type of range, and we see 8 touchdowns, like he'll still get you a very good usable season in an RB2 territory. The passing work that could potentially take him over the top, that remains to be seen. And you gentlemen certainly raised some very good questions about that. Any other thoughts on DeAndre Swift? All right, let's go ahead and hit up David Montgomery. David Montgomery last season, 185 attempts, 775 yards, 12 touchdowns, 38 targets, 36 receptions, 341 yards to the air. Thoughts on David Montgomery?
Is there a running back that goes as underappreciated as David Montgomery goes? I am interested to see how the Lions' offensive philosophy might change a little bit this year now that Ben Johnson is with Bears. Maybe that speaks well for DeAndre Swift. But we'll see how it goes. But David Montgomery is another guy. He's a very safe RB2. He's a very safe RB2 with RB1 upside. So you get the best of both worlds. So goal line back, 12 touchdowns is not an easy number to replicate, but if he's going to see 30 to, I think he had 36 touches inside the red zone last year, if you can get 30 to 35 again, I think you're still in a good space. There's plenty of playmakers in this Detroit offense, but what Montgomery and Gibbs have is kind of this thunder and lightning, or really lightning and thunder now combo. I don't see that changing a whole heck of a lot. So I like David Montgomery. I like where he's coming off the board. I like that there's a little bit of upside. He finished his RB 18 and missed 3 games last year. I mean, that's impressive in itself. Now, the touchdowns carried that, but you missed 3 games and you were still a top 20 fantasy asset. that's really good to have, even with Gibbs's ascension, if you will, to kind of fantasy elite or borderline fantasy elite. So Montgomery's a guy that, yeah, I'm taking a peek at him as things are coming around. Sure, be able to kind of get some consistency in my running back room with some RB1 upside.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I look at. I had David Montgomery shares last year, and he was great. And as a running back 2 option, he was everything you want. So like it's kind of interesting that Montgomery and Swift are coming off the board virtually right next to each other, because it's kind of a similar role. I wouldn't be surprised if they're sitting right next to each other at the end of the year too. I would like to. I think Montgomery probably has an easier shot at getting higher up just because of how potent the offense is in Detroit, and I expect them to be the same this year. So I think he's got a better shot at finishing higher, but he is a reliable running back too. Reliable.
Right. And that's one of the beautiful things about David Montgomery is just how consistent he is, right? And how consistent that offense has been is the fact that, when they get down there inside the red zone, they're looking to give the ball to Monty to punch that in, right? And so, when you're getting that many carries inside the red zone, and it's not even just carries inside the red zone, like when you start getting down to that 5 zone, he's getting a ton of carries and can just punch the ball in there. And so that very consistent running back 2 for you with week in, week out could give you a running back 1 type of performance on that one. So I do like David Montgomery here, and I think that you're getting some decent value for this pick. Any other thoughts on David Montgomery? All righty, let's go ahead and head on over to Travion Henderson. And Travion Henderson coming over to the Patriots as a 2nd-round draft pick. Thoughts on Travion Henderson?
So I don't think that I'm buying Henderson as RB22, but I do think that there's a path there to success. Oh my gosh, I'm stumbling over words tonight. A path there to success because of the Ramondre fumble issues, right? There's a clear reason why they drafted Henderson so high there in the 2nd round. I think he's going to see plenty of opportunity there, but I do think it's going to be a bit more balanced between the 2 of them. So I think this is maybe playing into the burst. Maybe he does have some big playability. He did flash that at Ohio State. So you can get that out of Henderson, but I don't think that this is the right draft position for him. I think he's probably closer to, RB 26 to 28 by the time the season's said and done with. And so much like with Judkins, I'm just going to pass here on the rookie running back this year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for him to live up to this draft value, which is not his fault. But I just think it's going to be tough for him to live up to being the 22nd running back off the board. So it's a little too rich for me. I do think Ramondre Stevenson has the first right of refusal in that backfield. But I do think it is going to be a short leash for him. Either way, it feels difficult for Travion Henderson to get to where he's being drafted. That feels difficult to me.
Right. I mean, the talent is certainly there. Right. Then Kevin, you mentioned that he has some explosion and some explosive play ability there. Certainly a good pass catcher. And that's where I think that he kind of fits into this is the 3rd down back, change of pace back throughout the, on the other sets of downs here. But this is one of those that I do think Ramondre Stevenson's going to be running back 1 when the season starts. And it's going to take either Ramondre fumbling the job away or Henderson truly doing something spectacular to try and supplant that. But I do think that this is one of those that you're going to see Ramondre get the bulk of the carries early on, and unless doing something to lose the job, I have a hard time believing that Henderson's going to immediately come in and just supplant Ramondre Stevenson. And so with that is going to limit his upside and limit his ability to return the draft capital here. So for that reason and where he's coming off the board, I do not see him returning value at this draft pick. Any other thoughts on Travion Henderson? All righty, let's go ahead, and this will be the last one of the night. We're going to head over and take a look at RJ Harvey. And RJ Harvey last year was in college, coming in as a rookie over to the Broncos, who went out and spent his second round draft capital to bring Harvey to Denver. Thoughts on RJ Harvey?
I liked RJ Harvey a ton until they brought in J.K. Dobbins. Now, I still think there's a path for touches for Harvey, right? Like, I do think he's going to be utilized in this Denver offense. We saw McVay kind of go through last year, and I think this is going to be I think you're going to see a 2.5 headed monster here in Denver again. So, one of the guys that we didn't cover fell just outside of the top 40. I think he was at 41, was J.K. Dobbins. I think that as good as Denver is, they're not good enough to support a top 20 back and a top, 21, sorry, RB 21 and RB 41. I don't see them doing that much on the ground this year. So Harvey's probably a bit overvalued. I think there's some big playability there, but I also think that the veteran's probably going to lead the way here to begin with. Sean Payton, much like most NFL coaches, wants presence and stability and knowledge of the NFL game. Not that Harvey doesn't have that. He has big playability and can do a lot of things very well. But when you have J.K. Dobbins, you're going to lean on him to kind of coach that room up to begin with. And so I think Dobbins is the one who's going to get the first crack in this offense, not Harvey, at least for the first half of the season. It might flip after week 8 or 9, but to start the season, it's going to be the Dobbins show, in my opinion. And because of all that, I think it does kind of cap Harvey's fantasy value this year. So coming off the board, RB 21, probably a little rich for me, especially since I went on and on about how I think Caleb Johnson's going to be kind of the number 2 rookie back in this year's redraft format. So I will probably be fading RJ Harvey. Maybe he slides and I pick him up. If not, and I can't pick him up, I will probably take a stab at J.K. Dobbins later in the draft.
Yeah, Denver's bye is week 12, and it's a fairly challenging schedule, I'd say, up to that point. Fairly challenging afterwards, too. Man, Denver got hosed this year. I think it's going to be difficult again for RJ Harvey to early on to return this investment. And I think there's a reason why J.K. Dobbins is there, but I can see a way in which RJ Harvey does kind of take the lead in that backfield. But man, it's going to be difficult, and he's going to have to wrestle it away from J.K. Dobbins. So where he's going, I think is a difficult spot here at 21. I have a hard time seeing him finish there. So you probably not get your return on investment at 21 in a redraft. I just don't see the return on investment at 21.
No, I can see that as well. The only way that I think he can return value at this point and where he's coming off the board is for him to get 70 plus receptions this season, right? Like that's what it's going to take for him to get there. I don't see him, even coming close to 200 carries when this thing's all said and done. I think you're probably looking much closer to maybe 140, 150 carries on this one. You're probably looking maybe 600-700 yards on the ground and a handful of touchdowns. Where he will where he has the ability to try to return value and where it's going to have to come from, at least how I see this Denver offense playing out, is going to be from the reception work. And that's something that he does do very well at, but it's going to be one of those that I think we're going to have to see him get 70 plus receptions and get another handful of 6 touchdowns through the air for him to get up there and try and return value at running back 21 or better. So it does give me a little bit of pause here, but this is one of those that if you're going with Harvey at this type of draft capital, you really are kind of calling your shot on this one. And this is a guy that I'm a little bit willing to be wrong on this one. Certainly does have some potential upside, even all the way up into RB1 upside, but I just don't necessarily see that happening. And I don't see the volume there to do it. There's other guys around here that going after him that I think I would rather take my shot on just from a consistency play. Any other thoughts on RJ Harvey? Alrighty. Well, guys, I do think that that's going to take us down here to the end of it tonight. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
I think, if you guys have questions of some deep round guys, feel free to hit us up at Good Old Boys FF. For the sake of kind of getting through some of these and making sure we cover all the positions, running backs 41 and down are being nixed. Not that we don't have opinions on those guys. There's quite a few of those guys that we actually like a good amount. But hit us up. But thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys chiming in and the side banter, the questions, what have you. But y'all be safe over the 4th of July. Make sure you come back with all your fingers and enjoy the time with the friends and family.
That's 2.
Again at the end, and it was going to be another horrible joke. Golly. Not doing it. Moving on. Thanks, everybody.
That's anyway, love it. That's becoming par for the course. Anyway, moving on there.
You need to do a side-by-side of Alex's face right now compared to what he had last week, because I think it's the exact same face.
All right. Yeah, that might be one of those we have to go back and do that and just go.
It wasn't even going to be funny. Like it. That's karma.
One of those you do it as the who wore it better type of thing, and just have Alex's face side by side to see which expression he wore better.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if I can get the video editor to take a look into that. So, alrighty. Well, that's going to do it for us tonight. Appreciate everybody tuning in, chiming in, all the comments. Again, head on over to all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, at Good Old Boys FF. Do us a favor, head over to YouTube, click that subscribe button, ring that bell. But that's going to do it for us tonight. We'll be back next Tuesday, 11 p.m. Eastern. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.